The sacred snake dance. What happened if it didn't rain? If it didn't rain, the plants couldn't grow. Then everyone worried about what they were going to eat. The Hopi usually had a 2 or 3 year supply of corn stored away. It was their insurance. But once in a while, a drought lasted for years. Then everyone ran out of corn and had to eat wild plants and seeds. It was very hard to find enough wild plants for everyone to live on. But there was one plant that grew everywhere, tall grass called drop seed. If you put a cloth under it and shook it, lots of seeds would fall to the ground. The seeds were ground up into meal. It didn't taste as good as cornmeal, but it kept you. Would you ever have to leave your home? If the drought lasted too long, there was only one thing to do to keep from dying. Everyone would have to leave. You might have to walk for more than 200 miles to live with other Pueblo Indians along the Rio Grande River. There, you and your family would work hard just to get enough food to eat. It would be a terrible time. But one day, a wonderful thing would happen. The rain would return. Then you and your family and everyone from your village could go back. What did girls have to learn? Hopi men and women had different jobs to do, so girls learned their mother's work. You'd have to learn to repair the walls of your house. It was the woman's job to replace missing stones and plaster the walls with clay. You'd also learn how to make pottery and baskets, but you wouldn't learn how to weave and sew. That was the men's job. Women did all the cooking. Before dried corn was cooked, it had to be ground into cornmeal, so women spent many hours a day at their matats, the grinding stones. Grinding took a lot of strength because dry corn was very hard. If you were a girl, you would learn how to grind a little at a time so that your arms would get stronger and stronger. While you were grinding corn, you'd have plenty of time to talk with your mother and your sister working next to you, and you'd have plenty of time to sing the beautiful songs that Hopi women sang while they worked. What did boys have to learn? All Hopi men were farmers, so if you were a boy, you would learn how to be one too. You learned how to grow corn, beans, squash, and cotton. You'd also learn how to put on the religious ceremonies of your clan, and you'd learn how to spin cotton, weave, and sew clothes. That too was the men's job. When you were at 6 years old, you started helping your father in the fields. He would show you how to plant seeds deep in the ground with a digging stick, and he would teach you how to build windbreaks with stones and brush to protect the young plants from the blowing sand. You'd also learn how to kill mice and rats, even if you had to dig them out of their holes first. If you didn't, they might eat the crops. At harvest time, you'd have to hoot and holler to chase off the crows. Every boy learned how to hunt rabbits with a bow and arrow. Hunting kept the rabbits from eating the crops, and it meant delicious rabbit stew for dinner. What was the Hopi way? The Hopi believed it was very important to have a good heart. Their religion taught them so. To be helpful and kind to others, to live in harmony with the world. That was the Hopi way. Thoughts were believed to have strong powers. Bad thoughts, such as feeling mean or selfish, could make you sick or harm others. Good thoughts had the power to help, and if many people together had many good thoughts, then those powers were so strong they could help bring rain and good harvest. This, the Hopi believed, was especially true of group prayers. So if you had mean or sad thoughts one day, you would not join in religious ceremonies. You would wait until those thoughts were gone. Otherwise, you might keep the prayers from working. What was the Hopi religion? The Hopi believed everything in nature had its own sacred spirit. People, animals, plants, even rocks and clouds. They also believed in great spirits, sometimes called gods. Some of the most important gods were Saskatchewan and Tawa, who created the world, and Kakyang Wuti, or Spider Woman, who many Hopi believed created the first human beings. The Hopi believed that if you lived in harmony with the spirits, they would be rewarded. Plenty of rain for the crops and good life for their people. But to live in harmony, you had to do what they called a good heart. That meant being truthful and kind and trying to live in peace with your neighbors. It also meant honoring the spirits with prayers and performing all the sacred ceremonies. The Hopi believed that their ceremonies were important for everybody, not just the Hopi. They believed that their ceremonies were necessary to keep the whole world in balance. Who were the Kachinas? The Kachinas were the Hopi's special protectors. They were not gods, but powerful spirits who the Hopi believed came to their village every year to help them. If the Hopi had performed their religious ceremonies well and had good hearts, the Kachinas would bring rain and a good heart. At Kachina ceremonies, men dressed as Kachina spirits. They wore masks that covered their heads and sang and danced in the sacred ceremonies. The Hopi believed that when the men performed these rituals, Their human spirits were replaced by the actual spirits of the Kachinas. Most Kachinas were kind and often gave out presents to the children, but there were also a few scary ones. With more than 200 different Kachinas, it wasn't easy to learn who they all were. That's why you might be given Kachina dolls like these to help you remember. What was a kiva? A kiva was a sacred room that was often underground. To enter, you climbed through a hole in the roof and down a ladder. The kiva was a very important place in the village. This was where the men planned all the religious ceremonies, prayed, and discussed governing the village. If you were a boy, you would go down there to learn about the Hopi religion. You would be taught all the songs and dances, the prayers, and the secret ceremonies. You would be taught how to make Kachina masks and costumes, and you would learn the sacred history of the Hopi people. As you got older, you'd spend more and more time with the men in the kiva. There was a lot to learn, because their ceremonies had to be performed just the right way. Otherwise, the Hopi believed, they wouldn't work. Would you have fun in the kiva? Yes, sometimes you went to the kiva just to relax and sing and tell stories. The Hopi loved to sing and make up new songs. The Hopi were also wonderful storytellers. You learned the stories by hearing them over and over again. Then one day, you might become the storyteller. While you listened to the stories, you would probably weave or sew. The Hopi liked to work, and the men made everybody's clothing, even the beautiful white robes that Hopi brides wore on their wedding day. What happened if you did something bad? Hopi children were raised with lots of love and patience, so most of the time it wasn't necessary to punish them. If you did do something bad, like neglecting your work or hitting someone, your father didn't punish you, your uncle did. He might take you from house to house and pour cold water on you while your relatives watched. You'd be so ashamed that you'd probably never do that bad thing again. What if you were really, really bad? Every Hopi child was told what would happen if you continued to be really bad. The ogre Kachinas, who ate bad children and came to the village once a year, would come knocking at your door. The terrifying monsters would call out all the bad things you had done. You'd stand there shaking, looking at the big fangs and their basket for carrying you away for their supper. But your family would refuse to hand you over. They would plead with the Kachinas, telling them about all the good things you had done. Your family would offer the Kachinas rabbit meat and pika bread to eat instead, and they would promise that you would be good. Finally convinced, the ogre Kachinas would move on down the street to knock on another door and call out the name of another misbehaving child. If you were a young child, you wouldn't know that they were really villagers dressed up as Kachinas. Would you go to school? Hopi children learned by doing what everyone around them was doing. They didn't have to go to a school the way children do today. Your teachers were your parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, sisters and brothers, and other clan members. They taught you everything you needed to know: how to farm, grind corn, hunt rabbits, make pottery, build your house, and gather wild plants. You learned Hopi history by listening to the storytellers, like those who came to your house on winter evenings after everyone had finished their supper. The Hopi used their memories to preserve important information, just as we use books and computers today. They did not have a written language or books. You learned by hearing something told many times. After a while, you got to know the information so well that you could teach it to someone else. Did children have to work? Yes, everyone, even young children, helped with the work. There were no stores where you could buy things, so people had to make everything themselves. Shoes, clothes, blankets, axes, even cooking pots and ovens. They took a lot of time. When you were little, you started out by helping your mother with the cooking and cleaning. You also helped bring in firewood, and you went out into the desert with your mother and your aunt to pick berries and gather wild plants for food and medicine. Were boys more important than girls? No. Unlike most societies, the Hopi thought boys and girls were equally important, just as they did men and women. Hopi girls knew that when they grew up, they would own the land, the springs, the houses, and the food. They would even own the seeds that were planted each spring in the fields. They would cook and take care of their house and their children. They would also make the pottery and baskets that the men traded with other Indian tribes. Hopi women were famous for their beautiful pottery, and trade brought the Hopi many things they wanted, like buckskin, parrot feathers, sweet agave plants, seashells, and turquoise. Hopi men performed all the religious ceremonies. They grew all the food, and they defended their village if it was attacked. The men thought that the women did was just as important as what games would you play? Hopi children loved team sports. You'd run races and play lots of ball games, and you'd play dart throwing contests with darts made of corn cobs and feathers. To the Hopi, the fun was in the game, not in who won, so you'd probably not bother keeping score. Some games, like archery, were thought to have sacred powers to bring rain, so when you shot your arrow at a rolling hoop, you'd not only be having fun, you'd be helping the crop. Everyone loved a game that was much like our field hockey. The ball was made of a buck's skin stuffed with deer hair. You'd hit the ball with curved sticks. There was no time limit on the games, so you could play as long as you liked. If the moon was bright, you might go on playing after it got dark. What would you do in the winter?